What's going on, everybody? Good afternoon. We are here on Tuesday, and we are now officially fully post week 3. So you get past week 3, the NFL landscape kind of sort of starts to take shape. Although, honestly, the way this season has gone so far, I don't feel like anything's really firmly taken shape yet. And there's a lot of parity and there's a lot of mediocrity in this league right now. A lot of teams just kind of look average. And that's going to make this video a little bit harder to make because I like to make this video every year. And this year, there's going to be a little bit less to talk about because we're talking about trades. Specifically, we're talking about fire sales, right? Fire sale in sports, pretty simple idea. A team maybe thought they were going to be good, they end up being bad. They end up being really bad. They end up being so bad they got to give up on the season early. So they need to auction off their good players before the trade deadline. It's either that or lose them for nothing. And they can get out of a little bit of a salary cap obligation usually by trading the player. They can get a pick back. So we see this in sports all the time. And we're not that close to the trade deadline. We've still got a couple of months almost to get through before we get to the actual trade deadline. But if we're in week 3 right now and your team is 0-3, your team has started 0-3, you can probably start to think about next year. You got to at least consider packing it in. Now, in the modern NFL, I feel like teams don't really like to do this. They talk themselves into, we'll make a big run at the end of the year. There are 7 playoff spots now. Maybe we can get in with like an 8-win record. Or we'll turn it around next year and we'll make a run at it next year. So we need to keep our good players because we need them for next year. In the old days, felt like that didn't happen nearly as often. So what we're talking about today is purely hypothetical here. Understand that I'm not suggesting that any of these teams would even be interested in fielding phone calls right now, but I do believe that if you are 0-3 or 1-4 or 2-5 or worse early in a season, you should probably think about selling. So let's take a look at some of these teams that should probably be thinking about selling some of their assets and see if there's anything worth getting. Before we get into the video, though, I want to say I hope you like this video. If you do, please click the thumbs up button down below. Subscribe if you're new. Click the bell for notifications. Become a channel member for $2 a month. Those are the best ways to help support the channel. So let's open up our little look around the league, the bottom of the league with the Bengals. Bengals are 0-3 now. They have a notoriously cheap owner. They are going to have to do something with Ja'Marr Chase, either lose him or franchise him or extend him in the next, what would that be, 6 months? Apparently he won't negotiate with them during the season. I'm sure if the contract offer was good enough, he'd come back around, but they got that coming up. They've got, obviously, a lot of BruÄ money is going to kick in soon because his bigger years on his contract haven't even started yet. So the Bengals, if they can find a way to clear some current and future cap space, that might go a long way. And in that division at 0-3, I know it's been 3 pretty tough losses, but you got to start thinking this is a year to tear it down, try again in 2025, and it just chalk it up to a little bit of a funky offseason because of the Ja'Marr Chase holdout and some bad luck. Now, the problem is when you're trying to find guys to trade for, the Seahawks, really, there's not much they can trade for, right? We know what they need. What are we going to trade for? A wide receiver? Are we going to trade for a defensive edge rusher? Going to trade for a cornerback? No, we don't need those things. There's really only 2 things worth talking about: offensive linemen and linebackers. If you're going to make a trade, it will be for one of those 2. Maybe you could go get another running back if you really don't trust McIntosh to do anything, which right now we don't. But that would be such a meaningless nothing trade that I'm not even going to talk about it. Like what? You're going to give up a conditional 7th round pick for somebody's 3rd string running back? No, I'm not getting into that. But looking at the Bengals offensive line, like let's break this down. So Trent Brown actually got hurt yesterday, I think. So I don't think you're trading for him. He got carted off to my knowledge. So, you're not trading for him. You don't need a left tackle. You can't trade for a center, although Ted Karras would be an interesting name if you were thinking about it. Right guard, look, even if you're done with Anthony Bradford, which I'm not, but if you're completely done with him, like you just want to eject Anthony Bradford into the sun, you still can't trade for a right guard as far as I'm concerned because you just spent a third round pick on Christian Haynes. So you can't spend more resources on right guard when you already spent all them resources on that right guard. So yeah, I'm not really looking at that. So the only guy you could even begin to look at here would be Cordell Volson, the left tack guard. And like, do you really want to trade for Cordell Volson? Like, he's been passable the last year, the year before that, not even. Like, he's still young, I guess, but is this really what we're going for? A fourth round pick from a couple of years ago? I mean, financially, it kind of makes sense that they would try to move off of him if they didn't want to keep him long term because this is the third year of his rookie deal. Next year is the fourth year, and then you have to decide whether or not you want to re-sign him or not. But is this somebody worth trading for? Is this better by a significant amount than Tomlinson? It probably is because he's younger and more athletic, but are we really going to give up an asset for a player who doesn't even seem to be that good? I mean, the Bengals' offensive line has been notorious for being really bad. So I I don't think so, right? The only other thing you could do, you look at the linebackers over here, you've got Jermaine Pratt. I guess you could maybe cook something up here. Jermaine Pratt's a good player. He's been on the Bengals for the last several years now. Been a starter, been a key part of that defense. Had over 100 tackles last year, almost 120. Makes a lot of plays in coverage. Good player for sure. PFF has thought highly of him, generally speaking. Last year, a little bit more mediocre, but 2022, they gave him great scores. 2021 was the year they were really bizarrely brutal to him, but he's scored well so far this year. Tiny sample size, I get it. But it kind of lines up, right? Like he would be an upgrade over Tyrese Knight. He would be insurance for another Jerome Baker injury. But you are inheriting a non-trivial contract here. And that's like the other problem when trying to cook up a trade, right? We don't have a lot of cap space. And we could maybe create a little cap space, but anything you do to create cap space with these Seahawks negatively affects next year's cap space. So think about that for a second. If you make a trade for a guy like a Jermaine Pratt, who is making non-trivial money this year, who has a non-trivial cap hit this year and next year, you might affect your ability to keep Boye Mafe or Reek Woolen or Charles Cross or DK Metcalf. The list of guys who might or will want an extension next year is long. So I kind of see it, but I also kind of don't. But that's really it from the Bengals. Like, what else are you going to trade for here? Nothing else really makes sense. So we're moving on. Going to the next 0-3 team, the Jacksonville Jaguars. And they I know their first two losses were close, but to me, they look awful. To me, that team looks like a complete train wreck. I think they got to fire the coach. I think they got to blow it up a little bit. They can't completely blow it up because they just gave Trevor Lawrence $250 million. But there are some things they can maybe shed this trade deadline. So let's start with the offensive line where, I mean, again, like Ezra Cleveland just signed a contract with Jacksonville. They're not trading him. They just got him. The dead money would be insane. Brandon Scherff has never played anything but right guard. He's been pretty good, but he's just a right guard. And I know some people might object to my theory that we can't trade for a right guard because of the Christian Haynes pick, but I'm sorry, you can only dump so many resources into the right guard position. We just spent a third round pick on a right guard who had like 60 plus college starts. The guy is experienced. You got to put him out there and make sure he's bad before you think about making a trade. And if you've seen something from him in practice that tells you he's already that bad to where you're already closing the door on him after one off season in 3 games where he's barely played, then well, that's a whole nother conversation. But I don't think you can trade for a right guard. I don't think you can even have that conversation. You got to figure it out with what you have and then maybe trade for a left guard, which you're not going to do here. Anton Harrison's very young. They're not trading him. So I went over to the defense of the Jaguars, and this is actually something that gets me excited. This is me getting kind of excited about maybe trying to, call up that Jacksonville GM 13 times every day and see if I can catch him in a moment of weakness. 2 linebackers. Devin Lloyd, former first-round pick. I really like this guy in the draft. I remember out of, Utah. Really intrigued by him. Really great all-around talented linebacker. He's been a stalwart and a very important part of that Jaguars defense ever since he got there. Put up good numbers. I remember that first year he was already getting hype as like the best cover linebacker in the game. So far this year, PFF has liked him a lot. Again, small sample size, I get it. Last year, they really liked him too, though. They thought he made big improvements, and they didn't like him at all in 2022. So they're seeing improvement with Devin Lloyd, and this is a guy who they might try to build their defense around going forward long term. But if you can call him up and catch him in a moment of weakness where they're just thinking about blowing this up, and you can be like, hey, look, this guy might want an extension in the offseason. You've got the 2025 fourth year, and then you've got a club option in 2026. Maybe you don't want to deal with that. Maybe you don't want to be giving out big contracts right now when your team sucks. Maybe they'd part with him. I don't know, but it's got to be worth picking up the phone over. And then there's another linebacker here who's kind of in a similar boat, Chad Muma. Very similar boat here. Jacksonville drafted him in the 3rd round in 2022. I liked this guy. I scouted him a little bit that year when I thought we would need a linebacker. Hasn't played that much since he got to Jacksonville. He's played in games, but he hasn't started and he hasn't put in a lot of reps. Played a decent amount in 2022, but since then he's been quiet, kind of just collecting dust on the Jacksonville bench. I would definitely call up Jacksonville and see if I could pry away Muma for like a 5th round pick or something. PFF doesn't like him. A lot of places don't like him. I get it. It hasn't been a great start to his career, but I would not mind betting low here. Like, people talk about trying to get a quarterback that looks really bad, that might be in a bad situation, and seeing if you can, like, fix them. You know, guys like Justin Fields, guys like Bryce Young. I'd much rather do it with a player like this. 1, they're going to be cheaper. 2, I think it's much easier to be negatively affected by a bad situation if you're a cog in the defense. So, Chad Muma is in a very similar boat here, except he has no 5th-year option. Next year is the last year of his rookie deal. Then he's a free agent. Maybe Jacksonville parts with him for a little bit so they can get something for him, because clearly that team is not set up to win anytime soon, whether they're willing to admit it or not. So those would be the 2 guys on Jacksonville I would consider hunting. Then we got your Tennessee Titans here. Your Tennessee Titans, there's not a lot. They got a lot of interesting names on that offensive line, but they're not going to trade any of them. They're not trading Skoronski, as nice as that would be. I don't think they're going to give up on him already. They're not going to trade Nicholas Petit-Frere, or if I pronounce that right, or J.C. Latham. They just signed Cushenberry. And I don't see anything on that defense that is intriguing to me either, right? I don't want to trade for Kenneth Murray Jr. I can find 50 guys who are about as good as Kenneth Murray Jr. in free agency at any given time, probably. So there's one guy on this team that I might give them a call for, Dylan Raduns. I remember scouting this guy a lot and being very intrigued in 2021. I think he went like 2 picks before we picked Eskridge. So he was big on my radar. He's been playing all over the place in Tennessee ever since he got there. Since he got there. This year he's played only right guard and it's been, kind of whatever. But last year he was graded out fairly well and he played all over the place. Left guard, left tackle, right guard. Mostly right tackle though. So they feel comfortable putting him anywhere, and he hasn't been the worst. Hasn't been great. I mean, look at these 2022 grades. They're abysmal. But also look at how much they're moving him around. Like, they're not letting him settle anywhere, that's for sure. They're not giving him an opportunity to settle in on this offensive line. I mean, look at how much he gets shuffled. That's not good for an offensive lineman. Bring him in, trade a late-round pick for him. I don't think he would cost that much at this point. This is another guy who's actually at the very end of his rookie deal. He is a free agent, unrestricted, next season. If you could maybe give up like a 4th or 5th round pick for him, bet on the talent, bet on him getting better if he can settle in a little bit, maybe there's something there. But that's it from Tennessee. I didn't see anything else I would consider going after. But let me know what you guys think. Keep everything I said in mind, And remember that if you're going to trade for somebody, it's always better to do it for somebody cheap for the reasons I said earlier. We don't want to give up one of our really good players because we had to pay a trade guy. All right. See you guys later. Go Hawks. Let me know what you think.